I watched the opening scene from FX's new show, The Beauty, and it inspired me to make a gash wound out of silicone. So I did. Mine is more shallow than the one in the show, but this is my first time making such a large prosthetic from scratch, and I have learned a lot. Starting with phase 1, sculpting. I'm just taking some saran wrap and outlining the shape that I want on the top of my arm. It's a rough measurement of how large I want this piece to be. Okay, it was originally a shoulder piece and an arm piece, but I did later change it to just an arm piece. I was gonna cut this out, and then I was like, nah, so I just drew under it. I'm using Monster Clay in medium, but any sulfur-based clay is good, like Chavant, some sculpting tools, a black stipple sponge, my favorite Kemper tool, W21, Kemper tool D3, a piece of wire screen, Bailey double-ended stainless steel modeling tool, a tongue depressor snapped in half. I like the texture it gives. 99% alcohol, cotton swabs, and I'm using a Lazy Susan. So first we need to spend an eternity rolling small balls of clay and pressing them right against each other. Try not to leave any open spaces. We're filling up the space within our outline. I'm taking the back of the Kemper tool and scraping the edges out so we get smooth, thin, transparent edges. And for real, I spent hours doing this sculpting session. The long transparent line in the middle is what we kind of want the edges to start looking like, the lightest amount of clay as possible. I tried a few different tools to try and smooth the balls out, but I ended up just using my fingers. Scraping and smoothing with my finger to get it as transparent as possible. If it's too thick, we scrape away and smooth again, making sure to stay within our outline. I brush off any debris and smooth the clay with some alcohol and a fan brush, and I do this with my fingers too, just to get it as smooth as we can. The alcohol dissolves the clay a bit, so it is easier to move it around, and it helps dissolve the edges. Now I'm doing a light crosshatch pattern with our stipple sponge for some initial texture, and now we go back and forth, scraping and dissolving with a cotton swab, scraping and blending. I'm doing that cross-hatching pattern again with the wire screen to give some more texture. Now phase 2, texture and blending. You're going to need more alcohol, these Kemper tools, and other texture tools. And this is the arm piece size I decided on instead of the shoulder piece. Taking the W21 tool, and at an angle, we're slightly dotting some pore texture. It should look more like a raindrop than a circle, and I smooth them over with my finger, and because it's on the arm, the pore size is more spaced out, and I'll go back and forth with doing different textures until I like how it looks. I'm doing this on top of a piece of trash bag that I cut up. gonna start sketching out the shape that I want lightly before I start adding clay. You don't have to do this, but because I was originally looking at a reference photo from the show, I wanted it to be more similar to the shape. Now I'm gonna start adding clay around the border of the outline that I made, just a rough placement. When that's laid down, I'll take my finger or the back of this tool and smooth down the edges of the clay both on the inside and the outside. And if I need to, I'll use this spoon tool as well to smooth it. Once it's smoothed down, I start to carve the deeper ridges of the wound out and adding more clay as I go. Doing this piece again, I could definitely go bigger, and when carving under lips of clay, you get some undercuts, which if big enough could prevent from easily releasing the mold. Mine was probably like right on the edge of being too much, or like the undercuts being almost too much. I'm adding thin worms of clay on the inside of the wound to give some different depth and organic features to the sculpt. We don't just want a flat piece in the center because that would not be accurate with the nature of this wound. I'm using different tools to make different textures within the center of the wound, more organic to various skin layers, muscle layers, and what exposed tissue would look like. I wanted to portray a fat layer in the thickest part of the wound, so I took little balls of clay and put them underneath what would be a layer of skin. Then I blended the edges of the fat layer. I put some more poured and skin texture on the clay that I added to the sculpt previously. Bringing us to phase 3, making the mold. I put clay into my pasta maker to make our flashing, and I'm pressing this clay up as close as I can to the sculpt without touching our blended out edges. Connecting the flashing pieces together and smoothing it out. Going back, I would have made the flashing a little bit taller. Now I'm cutting at a 45-degree angle to make the cutting edge, and this is where I would have made the cutting edge bigger, meaning allowing for more space in between the flashing and the edge of the sculpt, because I had some trouble while scraping the silicone, as you'll see later. Take a cotton swab with 99% alcohol on it and gently clean the white space in between the cutting edge. We don't want any debris in this space. We're gonna be making our box mold now, but next time I would have done it out of wet clay to save some silicone and some time. To make our box mold, I'm using some foam board, an X-Acto knife, and a glue gun. I'm measuring to get the height of each piece so that the walls are higher than the top of my sculpt, and I'm gonna hot glue each piece to the board. Now, a very important step is to hot glue every edge of the foam to encapsulate it so that no stone can leak out of any of the edges. I added more clay to reach the edges of the foam, and you would skip this step if you used wet clay. You would just push the clay right up against the flashing. Now I'm pushing the edge of the clay onto the foam so there is no space left for the stone to get trapped in once we make the mold. You could also make a silicone mold, but it would have to match the type of silicone you're using to make the prosthetic. For example, I'm using Platsil Gel 10 for the prosthetic, which is a platinum-based silicone, so for the mold, I would use a Platsil Gel 25 because it's also a platinum base, but it has a higher hardness, which is better for mold making. Make sure there's nothing in that cutting edge. To make our box mold, we're going to need a tub or bowl, a mold release spray. This is Man Ease Release 200. You could also use Free Coat, water, a small cup of water, chip brushes, Ultracal 30, latex-free gloves, and a respirator. And I needed to cut 4 sheets of burlap. I'm going to spray 2 light coats of the release on the piece. Make sure to get inside all of the crevices and the border walls. It should not be dripping. Water goes in and sift in the stone until there is no water at the top of the stone and it looks like a dry, cracked layer. Then we mix with our hands so there are no clumps. We want a thin consistency for our very important detail layer. You can do this in parts, but I used too much Ultracal and I didn't want to waste it, so I made it work. Ideally, you would make a small batch of a detail coat, wash the bucket, and do another batch of a thicker, drippy consistency. Paint a thin detail layer and always tap out each layer to get rid of any air bubbles. Then I drip in the next set of layers and tap that out. And you're going to want to drip it in until the top of the sculpt is covered and wait until it gets a wet sand consistency. I tap it to check. The first taps are too wet and squishy. The next taps are more firm and like wet sand. That way when I put the burlap in it, it doesn't sink into the sculpt. The burlap should fit inside the walls without touching them. I dip it into the Ultracal, squeeze out the excess, then place it on top for all 4 layers, tapping out between each. Finally, dripping or pouring Ultracal on top to encapsulate the burlap. I definitely could have used more Ultracal here as it was a little uneven at the top. Here it is 24 hours later. Now we demold. You'll need a scale, wooden clay tools, and toothpicks. Take off the foam pieces. I'm taking the screwdriver and I'm wedging it underneath the clay and carefully lifting on each of the sides. Take your time with this or you will crack this mold. Scrape off the clay in a container to measure it. Always use smooth wooden tools to demold because you could accidentally scratch this mold and that will show up in the silicone. For the small stuff, I'll use a toothpick. And I'm using a rasp to file down any rough outside edges. Phase 4, running the silicone. We need some Vaseline. Normally I would have a mixture of Vaseline and mineral spirits, but I didn't have any at the moment, but Vaseline is fine. Do a light layer and let that sit for 1 to 2 hours. This lets the stone soak up the Vaseline instead of soaking up all the baldies later. Then I wipe all the excess off. We need latex-free gloves, parfum, baldies, and acetone. First step is break the nozzle and spray a layer on and find out it's broken, and then brush on a light layer of parfum instead. This parfum is a type of release agent. To make our baldies mixture, you need a container with a lid, baldies, and acetone. You need 1 part baldies and 4 parts acetone, so I poured my baldies, then marked on the cup where the line was, and then used that to measure. Give it a light stir and then cover it because it will evaporate. To spray this on, we need an air compressor. This is my Iwata Ninja Jet Studio, our baldies mix, a Pache H airbrush, and a compressor hose. Please wear a respirator in a well-ventilated area. I opened the window too. Fill up our airbrush bottle with the mix. Make sure the airbrush nozzle is all the way open and the compressor is on medium-high, probably around 15 to 18 psi. And we're going to spray in circular motions on the entire piece, then rotate and do that on each side for a total of 5 to 6 layers. 1 rotation equals 1 layer. Then I do a pin test with a pin on every side to see if I have enough layers. That one's good, but these middle ones are a little too thin, so I went and finished the bottle. Now I clean out my airbrush with acetone. Take a paper towel and brush off the baldies only on the sides of the mold. We need a scale, our clay, tongue depressors, and some containers. Put the container on the scale first, then press tare, then measure the clay. These containers are too big, but I didn't really realize that until I poured the silicone, but just use smaller plastic cups. And mark each cup lid and stick with A, B, and D. We need the scale, Platzel deadener, silk pig pigments, flocking powder, and bright red, and toothpicks. So really important, we're gonna pour out way too much deadener, 56 grams. Now I tint the silicone. I'm trying to match my skin tone, so I'm doing some yellow, white, which gives opacity. I'm making olive on my hand, flesh tone, and I'm adding some red flocking. This mimics blood vessels underneath the skin, and you don't need a lot of this. Put cup A on the scale and hit tare, measure out 14 grams of part A, and do the same with part B. And now that the deadener is tinted, we can pour part A into part B and mix that quickly, and then pour part B into that same cup and mix thoroughly, very quickly though. Then high pour into the mold and take the tongue depressor and lightly rake over the flashing. This is where I had some trouble because my flashing wasn't so thick. You could also put the mixture in an evacuator to degas it before pouring it to get rid of more air bubbles. Once it's fully dry, we cover this in powder. A lot more powder than you might think, and get every edge. To release it, gently peel up one corner and cover it in powder and sweep the powder underneath the silicone so that when it's lifting at the same time, powder is reaching the newly released silicone. Go from every angle, don't just go from front to back, especially cover the edges in powder. Now, phase 5, we make the bladder. We need a foam board, clear trash bag, a straw, a red Sharpie, scissors, KY jelly, liquid latex, and makeup sponges. First, we make a small incision in the silicone where we want the blood to come from. I only have 2 this time. This is my first time making a bladder. Then go through the incision with the marker to mark the board underneath. Then making the shape of the bladder. Because my silicone was thin in this area, I made it a different shape. Normally I would do an oval shape for around the openings. Then draw the outline of where the blood flow and the tubing will meet. Dab on a light layer of latex that covers the Sharpie outline. Let it dry and do 2 more layers for a total of 3 layers of latex. Cut the ends off the trash bag, cut it in half, then open up the plastic and place it on top of the bladder. We're going to take the KY jelly and put a light layer in the center of the bladder down the entire piece. Then fold over the bag and press it down lightly and cut off the excess. Draw a smaller outline within our original bladder outline, still including the opening dots we made, and have it extend out past the end of the latex. This is the inner tubing where the blood will sit. Peel off the bag and cut out the outline. Careful not to separate the linings. Put it back on top, matching with the holes, and press it down, and now put another 3 layers of latex on top, making sure to encapsulate the plastic bag layer in between the layers of latex. Make sure each layer of latex dries completely before doing another layer. The tail end of the plastic bag that's sticking out past the latex, we're not going to cover that. Powder the top, and peel back the bottom latex layer and sweep powder underneath, coating the bottom. You can trim the edges, but be careful not to cut too much. Test the airflow with a straw. Put the piece back on top of the bladder and again mark with the Sharpie the opening points. Now carefully separate the top and bottom bladder layers and only cut the top layer of the marked Sharpie. We need astringent like witch hazel, derma shield, the prosthetic, the bladder, original Prozaid, some cups, acetone, translucent powder, this is RCMA, powder puff or brush, cotton swabs, scissors, forceps with a sponge that's been roughed up, some brushes, and a cut chip brush, 99% alcohol, a syringe with tubing in a 2mm diameter, different kinds of blood, KY jelly, and paper towels. Phase 6, application. Put some astringent on a sponge and wipe the application area and apply derma shield on the same area. I used a lip pencil to mark some dots for the bladder entry points. Pour some Prozaid in a cup. Dab on some Prozaid on the entry sites and the bladder because it is contact adhesive and needs to be on both surfaces. We're doing the flat side to the skin, not the openings. Once fully clear, meaning it's tacky, adhere the bladder. Now do the same for the silicone prosthetic. Starting with the surface surrounding the entry points, make sure not to glue the entry points shut. Glue down the base shape in sections, do not glue down the flashing yet. So now we're doing the flashing, which will be our edges. Do this in sections, allowed to get tacky and lightly stretch until there are no wrinkles, and smooth down these sections to adhere them. This was difficult to do on myself, and I found areas to improve on regarding the next time when I make another prosthetic, especially making the mold and scraping the silicone. I couldn't really tell where my flashing was, so I think I was stretching a little bit too much, but in the end I think it came out pretty decent. Start to dissolve the edges with some acetone on a cotton swab. Make sure to press and roll away from the piece. The swab should not be dripping with acetone. And make sure to dissolve a piece that is glued down, not a free flapping piece. Once the lining is gone, I go back and dissolve some of the edges further that I don't like. Now to fix some edges and secure it further. In places, I take some Prosthetic on my red stipple sponge and stipple along the edges where I dissolved. Once finished, I powder the adhesive and then take a paper towel with water and dab off the excess powder. My favorite part, painting. These are Skin Illustrator alcohol palettes. First, I'm splattering blood tone all over the piece with a cut chip brush and 99% alcohol. Then I'm going to splatter some rice paper over the entire piece as well, and olive tone. Now I'm taking blood tone with a brush on the inside parts. And then I'm gonna do a fat layer with the yellow tone that I also mix a little bit of blood into, just on those little balls of fat that we made during the sculpt. Then I'll go in with some of the aged blood tone in the deeper parts, and for the deepest parts I'll do aged tone mixed with some black. If I want to take away some paint, I'll take a sponge with some alcohol on it and gently tap off any excess paint. And we're going to take some KY jelly to make the piece shiny without adding too much blood, because it just covers the sculpt that we worked so hard to make. Then we add blood. I do coagulated blood in some of the deepest parts. And I'm gonna put the tubing in between the layers of latex inside the trash bag layer, and make sure to tape it up so it doesn't leak like mine. I mix up some blood with water, but I didn't have a lot of blood, so bear with me. It should be a little bit darker. And I got it all over the walls. And it's finished, and I could take it off with some isopropyl myricate and a brush. And it was pretty late that I finished this piece, so I was impatient with removing it, but take your time or you will have leftover prosade and silicone on your arms like I did. For my biggest silicone appliance, I think this went fairly well, and I learned a lot for the next one, and I definitely want to make something more gory with way more bladders in the future. Thank you all so much for watching. Please let me know if you guys have any requests for makeups, and please like and subscribe for more. Bye!